everyone. I'm so happy for you guys to join us today. I love this. I love the turquoise. Turquoise is actually one of my favorite colors, so I'm very partial to this. I'm excited for us to be able to talk to you about compliance and honestly the intersection with compliance and engineering within the AWS space and how we can actually help our customers, mainly you, be able to get in alignment with all the different groups that you work with. So I have a wonderful partner here. It's Peter. He is coming on board. He is absolutely amazing. And I will just get started with introducing who we are. So I'm Alexa Robinson. I'm head of US Government Security and Compliance at AWS. I've been at AWS for 3 years, been working with federal government customers for about 10 to 12 years now. It's been fun. I'm mainly from the DC area. Once again, I'm excited to be here. You will feel it coming from my pores, but I'm here. And I'll have my wonderful, esteemed colleague, Peter, here introduce himself and then take it all away.
Thanks, Alexis. Good afternoon. My name is Peter O'Donnell. I'm a Principal Solutions Architect covering security, risk, and compliance here at AWS. I've been here for about 7 years. And what I've learned from customers over this time is that this idea, bringing compliance and engineering together, is actually not how most customers operate. What we see, and what I have seen, even before I was here, when I was an operator, that this is sometimes an adversarial relationship. But the truth is, when we think about what well-architected means on the cloud, what a high-performing SRE team looks like, how do we know? What does that actually mean? Well, it means that they've designed their systems thoughtfully. It means that they've taken great care and concern in the choices they have made. It means they understand which trade-offs they have accepted and for what reasons. It means they build measurable, observable systems that work correctly, not only the day it was launched, but work correctly over time. In the exact same things that an SRE wants out of her architecture and the log exhaust and the programmatic measurability of the system is exactly what auditors want. And that's what compliance people want. And so the purpose of this talk today is to help you understand that these two groups are both critically important and truthfully, they want the same things. This idea of observability, this idea of measurability, of programmatic configuration, and deterministic configurations that are measurable as they change over time, in the exact same way that that's a DevOps story, it is also a compliance engineering story. And when we say we want the same things, what we mean is that together, you should be mutually engineering, that together, you should be designing these systems. And in the exact same way that we think about end users as a persona, and we think about operators as a persona, and we think about support as a persona when we design our computer systems, that a critical stakeholder that you must design for and with are your audit and compliance colleagues. That you can give them access to the services. Things like AWS Config, things like Security Hub, things like config rules and conformance packs, things like AWS Artifact that provide compliance documents, that those same people should be using the console. And that it's not pasting a screenshot into a Word document on December 31st, because that's not effective. But what is effective is building a continuous compliance program where we can begin to understand how these controls work in the cloud. When you come to the cloud and you maybe are already operating a robust controls program on-prem or even in another cloud, your controls kind of fit into one of these three categories. And if you're an engineer, you are also looking at these same three categories. And there are some things that are going to be exactly the same. You still have to patch your Linux instances. Terrific. Whatever tooling you're using for that, it'll probably work fine on the cloud. It's super simple stuff. There's another category where you're no longer in the business altogether because you've hired us. And if you hire AWS to run your cloud computing, that means you're no longer in the fire suppression business. So your controls for that are entirely our responsibility. And the good news is we have third-party attestation. It's in our SOC report, ISO 27001, many others. And you can know that we're doing the right thing, that we've locked the doors correctly, that we have a fire suppression system. But this third category is where the work is. And that's where things are going to be a little bit different on the cloud. Now, the good news is what we hear from our customers is that compliance can be better on the cloud, that it's not just possible, that instead you have an opportunity to kind of use the cloud to secure the cloud. So all of the same virtues that we talk about, higher order managed services, where we are doing more of the responsibility for you, programmatically defined configuration, all of those same benefits, robust telemetry and observability over time, that those are the ways to solve for compliance on the cloud, is to use the cloud as part of that journey. And so once you kind of understand that controls in the cloud work in a predictable way, that there's some stuff you're no longer going to do entirely, there's some stuff that you're going to be doing just the same, but the things that are going to be a little bit different is an opportunity for you and your engineering colleagues, and if you're an auditor, getting closer to those people, and if you're an engineer, knowing that you have to be close to those people. What was historically an adversarial relationship really can be a much healthier relationship on the cloud. Now, I mentioned this idea of things that you're no longer going to do entirely. That's where you've hired us. Fire suppression systems is an easy one, but we're also responsible for secure data deletion, right? If you delete something in the cloud, do you know it was really deleted? Yes, you do. How do you know? Well, you're inheriting a lot from not only entities in this country, but we have a global reach, and our customers really like our global reach. And so if you're operating in Australia, we have IRAP. If you're operating in Germany, we have C5. But the point here is that you're inheriting a lot of compliance and controls just because you're building on the cloud. Just because you're building on the cloud in the first place, you're getting a lot of this stuff for free. However, you still have a very important role here. This is what we call the shared responsibility model, where AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud, but our customers are responsible for security in the cloud. And what that means is that if you launch an unpatched WordPress server and you put it on the internet, the exact same thing is going to happen to that unpatched WordPress server like any other place. That the cloud does not auto-magically grant you a special ability beyond that. So you are inheriting a lot of controls, but a lot of it remains your responsibility. And the good news is we've built a lot of services to help you figure this out. So whether you're an auditor or an engineer, you have this responsibility to be secure in the cloud. That means deploying and configuring our services in a way that is safe and consistent with your expectations. And it means deploying and configuring your own software in a way that is safe. Safety on the cloud is our number one way that we talk about security. When we say it is our top priority, what this means is that it's a necessary enabler for the business. That security is our top priority because running a business is our top priority. And so security being everyone's responsibility and compliance being everyone's responsibility from the engineers all the way to the executives. We have built some services that make this a lot easier, and we've highlighted a couple of them here that are key for this audience in this talk, and that's Audit Manager, Config, and Config's conformance packs, and Config rules. And these are fundamental to observing and managing the cloud And they give you a couple of very clever tricks. We give you continuous asset management, the ability to know when resources are launched in your environment, how they were configured, their provenance from where they came. Config answers these questions, and again, it answers them not only for the SRE, it answers them for the auditor. In the exact same way that we need developers who are building on the cloud to consume CloudTrail, which is the journal of all the API activity, auditors are going to want to see that same evidence. When we talk about config and conformance packs, config is not only asset management and change management over time, it can also be using the cloud to secure the cloud. The conformance packs also give you a programmatic and interesting, flexible entry point to not only observe correctness, but to even sample the evidence itself. That you can automate evidence generation and collection by associating it with the business activity of operating on the cloud. And you can move towards what we call continuous compliance. Now, some of these things require a lot of work. Some of these things require invasion into engineering, right? I want to run an agent on your box. Building those types of invasive controls is worthy, but it requires extra work. What we hear from our customers is that simply building better detective controls improves their overall posture. Everyone normally and reasonably focuses on preventative controls, and preventative controls are incredibly important. But some customers don't build the corresponding detective controls. This is a mistake. Number one, building detective controls means that you know your preventative controls are working. It's fine if you only want to build preventative controls, but you still have to build detective controls to know that they are working as expected. And what we know to be true is that building detective controls is easier and faster because it requires less coordination and invasion. That as an auditor, as a compliance expert, you can ask and should ask for more from your engineering colleagues when it is this easy to provide. You need better observability, you need automated evidence generation and collection, and these detective controls built into AWS that your engineering colleagues are already using. They're already using CloudWatch. They're already using CloudTrail to understand their API calls in their environment. They may have already enabled flow logs. Flow logs gives you telemetry about your network flows. It is not a copy of the network traffic, but it does let you know what's happening inside of your network. And so because your teams are already using these things, the audit persona, the compliance persona, can be adapted to this. And that we can provide access to these services to compliance personas and to audit engineers in the exact same way that SREs are consuming it. And so when you're trying to get started on the cloud, it's difficult to know where to begin because you probably have a charter to audit and have a controls program for everything. And that means you have to boil the ocean. So where to start? And so what we know is that our customers have workloads of differing impacts and different severities. Everybody has a mission critical workload. Some customers have even more critical workloads that is critical to not only their function as a business, but perhaps their role in a marketplace. And so understanding your workloads and where to focus your attention is part of this journey. And it's a journey you will begin alongside your engineering colleagues because they themselves want the same things. They want to know what kinds of impacts their work is likely to have, not only on the business, But they also need to know, am I changing a system where if it's down for 6 hours, it's okay? Maybe not great, but it's okay. Or am I changing a system that cannot tolerate a 15-minute hiccup? And so when you think about operating your controls program, and if you're an engineer, you think about operating with these high expectations, understanding the impact of a workload is critical to understanding the name of the game. And the name of the game is what could go wrong. And so when we think about how to bring controls to different environments, not all environments have the same criticality. Not all environments have the same data classification. But what we know is that if you try to get too fiddly with controls, you will make your production environments unusable, and you will make your non-production environments useless. Because you'll have so many controls in prod that you won't be able to do the business. And because prod is so onerous, your non-production environments become unusable because they don't accurately model what lives in production. And so what we hear from our customers is that the right way to build controls for this is to build an additive approach. That it's not lowest common denominator, it's highest common denominator. That you want to bring robust security controls to all life cycles, including and especially your non-production ones. Why? Well, number one, non-production is somebody else's production. And yeah, it's not going to knock your website offline, but it might knock your team of highly paid developers offline. And that's a productivity problem, and that's a business management problem. Number two, this idea of building in ever more higher controls is necessary for the business, and developers have to expect to operate in those environments. And so if you build only robust controls in production, your developers are not even seeing the real environment in which they will operate until far too late. And so we want you to think about controls as an additive process. And as described earlier, the easiest thing to add is enhanced observability and detective controls. Adding ever more preventative controls as you go up this stack can be really, really challenging because you don't end up with reproducibility. And having good, high quality, reproducible life cycles is key to having success operating a production environment, is key to developing operational excellence. So this comes up a lot, especially for folks that are new to the cloud, and auditors that are maybe accustomed to on-prem tend to think in very kind of striated, latitudinal terms about where workloads are being tightly coupled to how sensitive they are. If this workload's in the middle of my core network, it therefore inherits greater security controls. And in the future, this stops being true. In the future, you're going to have many more purpose-built workload-specific networks. And so the location of a workload on the network no longer becomes a primary signal as to its sensitivity, and more importantly, no longer becomes the primary way it gets controls. A lot of people know this as zero trust. We're moving towards a future where the hard, crunchy outside and the soft, chewy middle is no longer a sustainable model for understanding security controls and inheritance. Number one, as it turns out, there's a lot of adversaries in that soft, squishy middle. Like, those horses are out of the barn. And number two, as we go towards a more decentralized, digital native types of use cases for our work, being on VPN doesn't need to become a sole security boundary. And so what we want are classifications that mirror and align to the business itself, not how it happened to be deployed as a technical architecture. That is to say, the classifications of data, the assignment of the significance or the severity of certain outages should, of course, follow the business purpose for having the software in the first place. That controls don't follow topology, and they don't follow development methodology. That controls follow the business and business criticality. So when we think about controls for everything, this idea of building incremental over time, we know that confidentiality is obviously one of the primary three triads for security. Call it data protection, call it confidentiality, call it business assurance. That these types of base level controls should be in all environments. That don't do dangerous things anywhere, even in your dev, even in your QA, even in your so-called sandbox. That these basic controls should live in every environment, not only to have the operational assured baseline of functioning controls, but also for the developer experience. Also because your developers deserve to operate in an environment that will be consistent with where they eventually deploy. And so when we think about the risk of change, that, of course, is fundamentally different for non-prod areas. That you aren't at risk for knocking the business offline, but nonetheless, the risk of change can be pretty high. If you knock over your beautiful, hand-built, non-production system, you might have ruined the days of 1,000 people. That's a lot of lost time, it's a lot of lost business, it's a lot of lost productivity, and it's a lot of crummy reinvestment to get it back up. And so again, we really want you to bring controls to all of these environments, including ones where the risk of change is maybe not as high. But when we get to different environments, where there is an enhanced risk, you want to be continuously turning what we call the security ratchet. It only goes in one direction, and there are no regressions. So we want really good IAM policy at a medium environment. Maybe you could have a more expansive, experimental policy in a non-production environment. But in a mid-risk environment, you really want to understand exactly why you're using the APIs. What are you doing with the APIs, and write policy based on that. And if you don't know why you're using the APIs, you have work to do. In the exact same way that a developer would never bring you a terabyte-sized Docker file, why is it so big? Well, I didn't know what software I needed, so I put it all in. That's a crazy answer. That's not an acceptable answer. Same thing with IAM policy permissions. Well, I gave myself S3 star because I don't actually know what I need. You have to know it. So when we think about environments where there is a risk for change, we want it to make it easier to do the right thing and harder to do the wrong thing. This means being more deliberate about some of your technical choices and what you make available to developers. And if you give them something that works, they will not go monkey with it in an attempt to make it work and introduce security problems. That your job is safety, that your job is enablement to let the business move quickly. Now we know that the risk of change is a little bit different in medium environments, and you want to constrain who's allowed to do things. Some folks at the beginning of DevOps said, well, now if you're going to own all this, I'm going to give you the ability to manage all the infrastructure too. That can be good to a person, but the entitlements don't need to be all lumped together. And so limiting who can make changes and under what circumstances is a really important security control, because obviously change is where the devil comes in. Change is how you have bad days. Change is where you lose uptime, to say nothing of security posture. This idea of automating things that are done frequently is not just a security practice, it's also like, be a better employer. Don't hire talented, brilliant engineers and then give them the bad part of using a computer. Hire talented, brilliant engineers for their human judgment, for their ability to write software, not their ability to grep a log. Let the computers do the computer part of running computers, because running computers is hard, obviously. But let the computers do the computer part. And so automate repetitive things. You'll not only improve quality, you will improve developer experience, and frankly, you will improve employee satisfaction and employee retention by letting your humans do the human part. And finally, visibility, right? There's never enough visibility. And again, this is something that is easier to build than invasive blocking controls. Raise the bar on visibility. Sometimes customers talk to us about very popular logging products or log aggregation products, which can be expensive. The number one way to make them less expensive is to make them more valuable. If you're paying a lot of money for a really great log aggregation product, but you have not democratized access to it down to the developers, you're leaving a lot of money on the table in the sense that you've bought a really fancy widget, but you're not letting people use it. And finally, high-risk environments, where the confidentiality risk is really high, right? Here's your secret formula. Here's your algorithm. Here's your sales data. And so when we think about the confidentiality of protecting this environment, again, we want the same things. That your developers want this, your security engineers want this, and as compliance professionals, you need this too. Configuration's done entirely in code, and this is critical. This is where all environments should be. All environments should receive the benefit of infrastructure as code. You'll hear us talk a lot about that this week. Our partners are really good at it. Our best customers are really good at it. And what this means is that you get assurance, that you know why things are changing, and you know when things are changing, and most critically, you know how things changed. Once you get good at this, it becomes second nature. And this idea of using the cloud to secure the cloud pays dividends over and over and over. I mentioned rollback. Compliance is often concerned with assurance, or compliance is assured with uptime, but really you have to be assured about safety. And what we hear from customers is that investing in rollback, automated rollback, is so powerful. The old line is that you don't put brakes on a car to slow it down. You put the brakes on the car so you can go fast. Automated rollback is so that you don't need it. Automated rollback is so that if you do need it, it's no big deal. Oh yeah, we shipped a change and it actually broke. But it wasn't that big a deal because we only made that change to 5% of our fleet. And we caught it and we undid it all in the same afternoon. No more big bang changes. No more mass scale cutovers. We're preaching safety and we're preaching assurance. And again, we all want the same things. And again, finally, high visibility for changes. So with all these dynamics, with what you're going to build for both these stakeholders, for the audit stakeholder and the engineering stakeholder, there's a lot of relationships here. I'm going to bring up my friend Alexis Robinson. Alexis owns security assurance for the United States government customer, where assurance about doing things correctly is the name of the game. And Alexis is going to talk to you about the softer side of this and what it means to get the right people on the bus in the right seats and go to this much better future that you're going to build together. Alexis.
Hey guys. So first off, that was amazing. I've learned so much and helping to craft this presentation with Peter. He is one of the most esteemed, one of the most knowledgeable, one of the most charitable people I've ever worked with. And he was one of the perfect people to actually go through this discussion. Now I'm here to talk about that softer side, the thing that no one really likes to talk about, and it rhymes with politics. It's politics. It's politics. If you couldn't figure that out, it's politics. It's what I'm talking about. So, why is this important? So, the majority of people that come to me and are trying to understand, hey, I'm technical, or hey, I really understand the business side, or I really understand the compliance solution side, but I really struggle with going to the next level. I really struggle with making an impact. The majority of these people are missing this. Just saying. It's navigating the stakeholder relationships to be able to achieve an outcome that's mutually beneficial, right? And that's hard to do. Let's talk about why. So this is my type 5 or 6. If you don't know what a type 5 is, it's like if you're a comedian, it's like the things that you want, your sticking points. These are the things that you want to, stomp your foot on. These are the things that I feel are most common conflicts for security between compliance and engineering. Not just engineering from an engineering development perspective, but also even security engineers as well. So just because you both have security in your names or in your titles doesn't necessarily mean you're on the same side. Peter talked a lot about the adversarial relationship that ends up happening between compliance individuals and engineering. And these are mainly the common problems. Now, yes, I'm glad everyone's taking pictures of this. I'm glad that we're noting this. The important thing is you have to know that this is what exists. You can't come into the situation on trying to figure out, oh, why don't they like me on either side? This is why. You're pretty much, diametrically opposed here, right? So let's go through a couple of these. What I love is number 3. On one side, it's keep the organization compliant, which sometimes can be a direct conflict with keep the goddamn lights on, right? Like, we got to keep things running, which means anytime anyone from compliance comes in and puts someone against that path or disrupts a roadmap or adds another task is diametrically opposed to keeping the lights on, right? That's the thought. Even take like audit deadlines. Audit deadlines are very important to a compliance perspective because it can mean losing a certification, right? But that could be diametrically opposed to someone thinking of a build or a roadmap deadline, which is important for the business. And we all know the theme. We're going to say it again. We all actually want the same things. And it's important to keep all of these conflicts in mind, not necessarily as deterrents, not necessarily as opposites of each other, but as considerations as you engage with one another. When you're really talking to an engineering person, I'm on the compliance side, or an engineering person talking to a compliance individual. So these are the things that we really should be thought of and kept in mind when you are addressing or talking to someone from the other side. So one of my favorite people, obviously my VP, so I'm obviously plugging here, Chad, just letting you know that I put your quote up on here, so please give me more money. So this is one of the quotes that he has had in one of his talks that he did in previous years. And actually one of these quotes are actually on YouTube right now. But the goal, when we're talking about collaborative and scalable compliance, it's really embedding compliance in the way that we work. We talked a little bit before about how to do that in a technical aspect. And Peter did an amazing job explaining that. But you also have to get justification for even doing that. Sometimes it's very hard to even discuss, hey, how do we embed even more? There automatically is going to be a, hold up, no, wait a minute, what are you trying to do? So setting the scene, setting the stage for what you're trying to do to mutually get to the same outcome is most important before you even start. Because everything that you're asking for in order to do all the technical things that we're talking about requires what? Time, money, effort, right? It requires all of those things. How do you get the other side of the business? Because no, compliance and engineering are both business objectives, just being real. They're both parts of the business. You cannot do compliance without understanding the business. And most of the time, for those of you that are in larger organizations that are trying to achieve bigger and bigger objectives, compliance is right there with it. For a lot of you, and some use government, if you're going for federal government customers, what certifications do you need? You're going to need FedRAMP, right? If you're going to certain pieces of the business for banking, you're going to need PCI. If you're going to go for healthcare, you need HIPAA. Compliance is part of the business objective. Engineering, if you don't have a product to sell, then what are you going to do? What are you going to what are you going to charge for, right? Both are a part of the business objective, and that's why we always say we want the same things. So, here's some best practices. I'm not going to go through each one, but here's some best practices you need to think about, right? So you have to align on measurements for success. If you are going for a new compliance objective, if you're going for a new compliance certification, it is not a siloed decision that you make internally amongst you, yourself, and I, right? You do have to make sure that the whole organization is aligned. We are going towards this compliance, directive, or going to this compliance certification in order for us to achieve this revenue. I know that's a little bit weird, but when you look at a roadmap of a business objective, it's usually I want to achieve this much revenue or break into this market. Compliance, engineering aspects are part of that roadmap. And when you're a compliance person, don't talk about the compliance certification. Talk about the overall goal or measurement of success and how everything kind of aligns with that to achieve your objectives. If you speak about it in this way, everyone is on the same page or closer to getting to the same page, right? Talking about cross-functional enablement for compliance and engineering outcomes through mutual involvement. What that really means, I know it's a lot of words just put together on a slide there, but what it really means is understand what the other person does. If you don't understand what the other person does, if you've never sat in an engineering chair, and I'm not saying you have to code, it's not saying that. It's understand what their day-to-day looks like. Understand when you are disrupting, if you're a compliance person, when you are disrupting their piece or disrupting their day of work. What is going off the table for them in that day for them to be able to function? From an engineering perspective, you have to understand what customers are asking for. Yes, they might be asking for your feature or for a build or for your product, but they're also, like literally in hand, also asking for what is the compliance of this product? What is the compliance of this feature? How do you validate that? They're asking deeper questions. Our customers, you guys, are getting smarter. Our regulators, our auditors are getting smarter. They're right here at the conference with us, right? Like, raise your hand if you're an auditor. Yeah, see, look, they're here. They're here. Alert, they are here. So they're getting smarter, and they're understanding how the cloud, they're understanding how these products work, and they might even understand it, especially if they've been there for a while, more than you do. So when they're asking certain questions, and it behooves everyone, not just engineering, also compliance, to understand exactly why they're asking, build trust, keep their trust, to get faster to the outcome that you're looking for, which is either usually a revenue target or some other business objective to break in with another customer. That's very important. It's small here, but I really want to make sure to highlight this. Fund and prioritize education both ways. It's important that you're not just saying, hey, compliance person or engineering person, just sit with the other person. No, there must be some sort of structured education. I'm going to plug Cloud Audit Academy. It is definitely a great breakout that was there earlier today, but it's also available, and we'll have the link here that you can be able to screenshot. But Cloud Audit Academy is a way to be able to say, okay, hey, auditors, here's how you're able to audit the cloud in a more constructive way. Here's how you're able to look at things so it's not as invasive from an engineering perspective. If you create mechanisms like that for engineering, from an engineering perspective for compliance, it helps answer those questions faster, and it allows you to get to your business objectives a lot faster as well. Here's some additional best practices, right? Mutual advocacy and process improvement. You automatically care about another person's well-being if you know they care about you, right? If you're only in your own situation for your own objective and you're not understanding how this engineering group or this compliance person is a dependency to what your goals are, then you're not really going to be successful, right? It means you're going to go alone, by yourself, and no one really wants that. Well, I don't. You might, but I don't. I don't want that for you. So The other thing too, and we talked about it before, we really want everyone to understand this piece because it's going to be a theme throughout this the GRC track for the conference. Prioritizing independence and automation of edit requests is very important. It is not a throw over the wall, here's something that we need to be able to respond to. If auditors are educated and compliance is also educated on the interworkings and internal architecture of your systems and are able to pull what they actually need to pull without interfering with engineering work, it makes everyone happy and everyone successful. So even showing a roadmap of how you're going to do it, even showing, oh, we're trying to reduce, unplanned time or stakeholder hours in responding to requests or interviews, that also gets everyone on the same page. And people are more likely to work for you and work with you to be able to achieve that goal, all parties involved, then let's just get through another audit. Or let's get through another compliance exercise, right? So here's some examples of shared security goals. I'm not saying these are ours, internal to AWS. We definitely, bunch of little things, change some things, but this is some of the examples of goals that actually proved to be successful in some shape or form. And the reason why is because, and the reason why goals are important, right? They're SMART, so specific, measurable, all that. But they're also, it's something that everyone on all sides can recognize and understand what the importance of them are. And it also makes it very, very clear that both parties, compliance and engineering, have a stake in making this successful. So if you're making goals, and once again, it's in a silo, and it doesn't represent what engineering has to do or what compliance has to do to achieve that objective, it becomes very hard for everyone, including your leadership, CISO, CEO of your companies, to be able to understand, okay, I see how we're all working along together to be able to achieve this. So another example of this is the second bullet here. Obtain 15 regional compliance authorizations of services or features to enter new markets in 2022. Everyone understands that. Everyone understands what we're trying to do there. Everyone gets it. Everyone's like, oh, yes, I want that. I want to enter a new market. That makes sense. Yay for me. But everyone also now understands, oh, this is a shared goal that all of us have to come together to do, right? So one thing I love is the embed 10 security controls. This is one of the things that's near and dear to my heart. Embedding 10 security controls. Figure out how within the deployment process to reduce after-launch escalations and unplanned work by 30%. This is something that's near and dear to my heart because one of the things I love about engineering, and I'm a compliance person, but I love engineering, is I never want to impede their speed to market. I never want to hinder innovation. I never want to even have the perception that they think that I am trying to come in and be the police over what they do and how they do it. I want them to be as innovative as possible. I honestly want them to be compliant and not even feel it. Like, it's just there. They're able to play in a wonderful playground in a wonderland. And honestly, they should never really talk to me in my mind. I don't really want to talk to them. But yeah, they should never really talk to me. And that, for me, is a success. If I am putting more things in place so they don't even feel it and they can just exist. And meanwhile, at the same time, I'm on the other side and I am professing, oh, this is how great we are. We already got this done. We're faster and faster to get new certifications, new pieces of compliance for you. That's the piece that makes me happy from a compliance perspective. My engineering counterparts will say, well, no, Alex, we want to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, okay, you do? I didn't know that. But we actually want to get involved in helping to block or understand new requirements that are coming. And we want to be able to anticipate what they are so that if we have to change our engineering workload, we know in advance what's going on. We'll get to that. It's going to be called threading the needle. I'm so excited for that. So one of the things that we're going to get to is threading the needle, but also let's take a quote here. If you don't understand how engineering works, you're throwing requirements over the wall. How many of you, I know you can't fully respond, but how many of you have taken a requirement, right? You just got it from a customer. It could be not even just a compliance requirement, any requirement at all. And you're just throwing it over the wall to the person that you think could solve your problem. Like, how do you do this? How successful are you really when you do that? Not usually very. If you have a really good person on the other side of that wall, maybe they can thread that needle for you and understand what you're talking about and get something back to you. But when you do it more and more times, people are going to start losing trust in you, right? So it can be done. There could be escalations. And when I talk about escalations from an Amazonian standpoint, escalations are, hey, we got to move heaven and earth to get this done. We got to figure out, we got to involve leadership, and we have to understand how this actually works and be able to drive to get this done, right? That's an escalation. So most of the time, new requirements that are thrown over the wall, they can be resolved through an escalation or through some really smart people that are really understanding and are trying to work together, right? It can be done that way a couple times, but it doesn't really scale. And when I say scale, you cannot apply that 20 times. You can't continuously throw new requirements over the fence 20 times. Something's going to break, or people are not going to believe you, or people are going to think that you're not really operating with everyone's best interest at heart. And that's what's important, right? So when we talk about scale, it's how do you deal with new requirements? How do you deal with new expectations from customers that might be compliance related? How do you deal with new engineering requirements that actually might feed from a compliance piece that you're trying to build, but you don't understand the compliance side? How do you do that at a scale where you can do it 100 times and it really isn't as impactful as doing it manually, right? So this is the piece that I really want you guys to take away, and that's threading the needle. What does that mean? So threading the needle is not only interpreting the requirement on both sides, but knowing enough about the other side of the business to be able to give the other person exactly what they're looking for. And the reason why is you want to be able to reduce the likelihood of confusion. You want to reduce the churn. You don't want to throw a compliance requirement over. You want to say, hey, if you just give me this CloudTrail log, this explains everything that I'm looking for. If you're able to give me this screenshot from Audit Manager that shows me this, I'm good. And it helps also get to the why. So what is threading the needle and why is it important? Who's read Simon Sinek, The Golden Circle, or understand the concept, the why, right? If the other side doesn't understand why you're asking for what you're asking for, then they cannot help you be creative in how to actually address that situation or that issue. A lot of times on both sides, we automatically think, oh, this is how we solve the problem. But the other side can actually help us solve it in a more creative way. And there's multiple instances and ways that you can actually thread the needle in real life. And we're going to go through two case study examples that we actually did here at AWS. And quick point in that, the reason why I also laid out these personnel, these groups, you have to, if you are going to be a good engineering person that cares about compliance or a security engineer, or if you're a compliance expert, if you do not know all of these entities within your organization or externally, then it's going to be a problem. It's going to be very hard for you to really be able to finalize and understand what that why is to communicate it to others. So honestly, that means that you're not fully understanding the landscape of where you're going, right? So you need a public policy who helps shape requirements. You need a regulator to talk to understand the why behind some of their requirements. You need an auditor that's actually going through and attesting to those requirements. And you need engineering that has to build or provide evidence that what you're doing is actually worthwhile and meets all three of these people's objectives, right? So one of the examples that we have here is NIST Rev 5. So the change from 4 to 5 occurred. FedRAMP, which is the Federal Risk Assessment Management Program for the federal government, it's very important when this switch happened because it affected all cloud service providers. So most cloud service providers have to really deal with one or two very specific certification compliance requirements that really affect just us. And it's not just traverse of everything, it's just us. FedRAMP going from NIST Rev 4 to 5 is one of those, right? So when this happened, what we did in previous years was we just kind of kept it internal to ourselves. Like, okay, this is happening, and we should be able to address and provide feedback and figure out how this works. This time, in the past 2 years, we did something a little bit different that actually caused a lot of good feedback across the board, all around AWS, and great rapport that was built through this exercise. What we did, we decided to share those requirements with all of the personnel that actually have to build or deal with them. There was assumptions that we made as a security compliance group of, oh yeah, this doesn't affect us. And the engineering side was like, actually, yes, it does. It affects us greatly. And the reason why it was important is we shared it before it actually occurred. So then we could take those requirements, take that feedback from all the different groups that we worked with, and provide that to our FedRAMP regulator and change some of the requirements to make it more amenable to how AWS environment actually works. And that might seem like not that big of a deal. But from an engineering perspective, it's, oh, great. We don't have to actually deal with this new requirement. We're able to just shape this, and we're able to just say, oh, this is how what we're doing is already addressing the risk, and we don't have to do anything new. That's game-changing for them. Most of the time when things switch in this way, it is literally a wave where, honestly, it's a year or two for us to be able to get fully compliant in the way that FedRAMP wants us to be, right? This time, it's minimal, because we were actually able to work with our engineering teams, work with our public policy teams, talk to our auditors, talk to the regulators, and explain in a cohesive way how these new requirements are not necessarily addressing the risk of what they're trying to achieve, and here are better mechanisms that we could give you that would actually work while minimizing the impact for AWS. It's a lot. It was a lot to do this, and it was a very silent victory, just me being honest. But it was one of the things that really had engineering look at from a compliance perspective and look at us and be like, okay, we're on the same side. And the compliance side look at engineering like, okay, we all want the same things here. We don't want additional requirements that's going to burden us in that way. And we still want to be able to provide a good experience for the customer and still show, here's how we do things, and security is priority 0 for us, right? Here's how we do things, but here's how we do things to address the new risks that you're seeing, and how we still are able to address those risks while also talking to our regulators and auditors and really get them on the same page together. That's something that is a clear win from an AWS perspective, not just a compliance perspective, right? Another example is a case study is cycle assessments. So most of the time, compliance is a revenue generating activity. I'm gonna say it again. Compliance is a revenue generating activity. People don't think that, but I'm telling you it is. It really is. What I mean to say that, what I mean to say when I say that is that when you are trying to go for a certain business objective and you don't have your compliance pieces in order, it becomes very, very, very difficult, and you usually lag behind of the goals that you're having, right? So this was something that we invented called cycle assessments. So cycle assessments is a coordinated effort, and we made it visible. One of the things that Peter talked about was visibility for everyone in AWS, that if you're trying to go through a FedRAMP certification or any certification for that matter, here is your role, how this plays a factor, what happens, and what your responsibilities are throughout the full life cycle of the process, right? So when we do this, everyone from the engineering development side is like, okay, when I launch, I need to do this. When I go to onboarding from a compliance perspective, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to think about. This is what's going to happen for me. Here's the 3PAO assessment. Here's the regulator review and authorization. And here's what I'm expected to do for continuous monitoring. It makes everyone, and there's multiple teams. There's actually hundreds of teams that work around the clock on doing cycle assessments, and makes everyone fully cohesive in understanding what they're working towards. Once they get the authorization, they know, okay, this is what I'm going to get. I'm going to get this revenue target that I'm looking for. But here's my expectations afterwards to maintain that revenue target and to make sure that it grows. So if you're able to do things like this, to put in a visible way, in a visible mechanism, here's how this whole process plays a factor for everything that you're looking for from an engineering and compliance perspective, it makes everyone feel like they're on the same side. They're all part of the same process. They're not alone. They're not siloed off. There's no like, oh, I'm going to hand off my part and do my other thing. Everyone comes together and they're in alignment. So, we're at the 5-minute mark. Almost there. Some of the takeaways that I want you guys to get from this session across the board, right? Compliance by design is very important. It makes things so much easier for us from a technical perspective to be able to attest to certain things, but it also makes it easier for our engineering folks to be, okay, I'm hands off, I can just go and play now, because everything I'm playing with, all the building blocks are all compliant for me. All this makes sense. when we're having detective controls with certain AWS cloud services for some of the customers that are in the room, if we're playing in that market, then it makes sense for us to be able to say, all right, I can be able to detect, I can be able to give things over to my auditors, then we can run smoothly and automated, and we don't have to worry about invading my day-to-day work from an engineering perspective, right? Building a culture of trust is very important, and that takes alignment. You cannot have trust without the alignment to the business objectives. Aligning to those measurements of success with shared goals, make sure everyone is on the same page and everyone has skin in the game. And if you thread the needle with regulators, public policy, and different stakeholders to be able to get new requirements either blocked or adjusted in a safe way, then everyone also will, everyone will feel good. Everyone will feel good, and everyone will feel like it's a shared win, not just for an engineering side or a compliance side, but from an AWS side. Understand we all want the same things. So here's some related sessions for you, if you have time to go through this throughout the rest of the day. So obviously Tuesday, there's a building a security posture like leaderboard using AWS Security Hub. That's gonna be in the builder session. I'm so excited for that. That's at 3:30. There is an automating security and compliance with OSCA workshop tomorrow. It's a repeat session. I'm so excited for that. And there's a crawl, walk, run, accelerating security maturity. I'm so excited for that session too. Justin is absolutely amazing. And then here's a link for the Cloud Audit Academy if you want more information about educating auditors and engineering about how to audit in the cloud safely. So yeah, thank you guys so much for your time. It's my first breakout session, so yay. Thank you guys so much.